Hello, hello, hello.
What's up, buddy?
Not too much.
Do you think that all debt should be canceled?
Uh, More practically, probably I'd do the means tested stuff, but like in the long term, yeah.
Do you think that everything in society should be free?
Depending on your definition of free, yeah. Because I think part of
Okay,
the
why did you tweet out that I'm strawmanning your positions if you literally just said that? Can you explain to me that?
sure, because what they were talking about in that thread was not making everything free.
They
Like if you
talked
go
about
through the
making
tweets,
food free.
sure. So the first one was Cory Bush said, "We want to cancel student and medical debt because we believe education and healthcare are human rights." So then you said, "Does that mean food is going to be free too?" Because presumably you think food is a human right.
I would imagine so, yeah.
But even were we to say that everything that's human right should be free, that's not everything. And
No, but
again,
if you're at the
free has
point of
multiple
making all food free, basically at that point you might as well make everything free. Like if we're
Sure.
if we're gonna go by the human rights, we're gonna go by like housing, shelter, and clothes. If these three things should all be free, I mean, at that point we might as well just make everything free. Like,
not necessarily. So part of the discussion around this is like what free means. So like, would you consider? It seems like when you're talking about free, you're talking about free at the point of service, right?
yeah,
So I think that some people clearly aren't talking about that. When they're saying food should be free, they're usually talking about like subsidies, like either to food or the food consumer.
what does that mean?
Like food stamps, for example. They're basically a subsidy to consume food.
Food stamps are means tested,
Yes, they aren't universal, but we could imagine a universal food stamp program.
which would make it
Or if
free
you
at
want
the
to roll it
point of
into like a
service.
universal basic income sort of thing.
Do you think we can make every single good and service in society? Oh, hold on. Let's not go extreme.
Most of the human rights ones, yeah, probably. Like
So food, housing, and
for a finite
clothes
list.
can all be. Do you think that? Okay, so I don't understand. If you want to defend this take, we can have this argument, but you can't say that I'm strawmanning positions if that's unironically what you think.
Sure, because Red Charlotte, the person you responded to, said, "Why not make food needs subsidized or free?" Like they aren't just saying everything should be free at the point of service, which I think is what you're referring to.
Link me
They're
the
just saying it should
tweets.
be like
Link me the
accessible
original
to everyone.
tweets. Link me the original tweets. This is not
Sure,
how I remember this playing out, but go for it.
Sure.
All right, so Cory Bush says, it's simple, really. We want to cancel student and medical debt because we believe education and healthcare are human rights.
Yep.
So the implication from her tweet is if something is a human right, I guess it sounds like it's free at the point of service. That's what that sounds like. But the next one is Destiny says, does that mean food is going to be free too? And then Charlotte responds and said, why not make basic food needs subsidized or free?
Yep.
If you're going to make food free, which is one of the easiest things that market forces can act on in an effective manner, probably one of the only last defenses that capitalism can have of itself.
Sure.
If you want to make that free, then it seems to logical. So then my response to that is in all caps, yeah, bro, everything should be free XD.
Sure. So I think when I read the tweet, I see two key words. One is subsidized, the other is basic. Clearly, it seems to me they're not saying that all food should be free. They're saying that subsistence food, basic food, should be subsidized or free. And the subsidized or free thing, I think, is a nod to the fact that if markets work for this...
Isn't it already
ahead.
that way in the United States? Don't we already have food stamps and WIC and...
To some degree, yeah. Like, presumably, some people would argue for an expansion of that. There's like dozens and dozens of articles arguing that there's significant food insecurity in the United States. But leaving that aside, right, we do some of this already. The argument is about expansion, not about, like, a binary whether we do it or don't.
Why would you respond to a tweet where somebody says we need to cancel student and medical debt, and then I say, is food going to be free too? And then someone says, oh, well, we could subsidize low-income food. Like, Cory Bush's tweet is clearly implying a universality there based upon the human rights. I'm responding that just because something is a human right probably doesn't mean it should be universally free. So why would you respond with, oh, well, what if we means test food? Like, how does that response make sense in that context?
Sure, because generally, so there's two ways of thinking about this. If we wanted to think about food that was free at the point of service, we could either imagine that you're talking... So I don't think Charlotte is talking about food free at the point of service. Like, that's because clearly in their tweet.
Then why would they respond in my tweet when I'm being critical of somebody saying that just because something is a human right means it ought to be free?
Because there's a miscommunication here about what free means. This is what I was trying to get at. So like there's this classic chart that you can have about whether something is universal or means tested, about whether it's in kind or a cash grant, right? And so I think that you seem to be thinking that everything that free means universal and in kind. The government will like hand you a hamburger if you're really hungry or something. But other people think free can mean something like food stamps, where free means it has a near zero budgetary impact on you. Like subsidized housing, the government doesn't necessarily build you a house, but they give you the money to buy a house, that kind of stuff.
Sure, and I would be critical of both of those things, but you've backed this up to subsidizing it for low-income people, which is means testing.
Well,
unless you're saying food stamps for
sure,
every single person,
imagine.
which is essentially the same as like free at point of service.
Sure. And so that's one of the other quadrants here is universal and cash. So, for example, one of the arguments people have about universal basic income is, hey, just give people money. They will buy the food.
Hold on.
They will buy the housing.
Okay, I know all of this. You know that I know all of this, and I know that you know all of this. Do you understand how dog shit the messaging is on this? Do you know how fucking stupid it is that like...
I don't think there's a big message on free food. I don't think that's something
there
people
is a
commonly talk
massive... look at the fucking... All of this was spawned off of that fucking top Reddit thread yesterday where Ben Shapiro was being like, oh, should we forgive this debt and this debt and this debt? Everybody's like, oh, you're starting to see the picture now. We should forgive all debt, all consumer debt, all medical debt, all housing debt, all blah, blah. Like, what the fuck? What kind of policy is that? Like, what world are we living? Are you going to seriously sit here and pretend that like a lot of people don't share that opinion? That like we just need to forgive
some
all
people do.
Okay.
So one of the things you talked about was like in political circles, when the people that are actually talking about this, they're talking about like generally the near term reforms are stuff like trying to remove debts, trying to subsidize colleges, trying to move in this direction. In the very long run, maybe we can talk about like an in-kind program of some kind. That's clearly not
that's
what,
like
the
way the
Democrats are
fuck
talking
away.
about.
Like maybe and
They're
at that
talking
point
about
we can
Redditors, my dude.
it's not just Redditors, unfortunately. I wish it was, but it's not at this point, right? You're seeing like this all kind of plays into that broader conversation of the whole like pushing the party left and blah blah blah, that certain people like AOC are like the whole fallout related to this last election cycle has to do with this inner schism in the Democratic Party between like the very far left, the very 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 progressive people versus the more moderate Dems. And this conversation is an extension of that. It's not just lay Redditors. You've got actual Congress people on calls saying these fucking progressives are fucking our elections up. So it's not as much as I wish I said that a year ago. I wish I could say that it's just lay Redditors, but it's not. Like this total
Redditors
application.
are the ones who are saying like, hey, we want to just abolish all the debt like today, tomorrow. When Cory Bush is saying like targeted debt relief about certain issues, I think that's a more like targeted proposal than like arguing for decom modification to everything, which is literally socialism or communism.
Canceling all student and medical debt with the argument that they're human rights is a pretty radical like idea in like a pretty politically unfeasible way.
So as I understand it, like I don't know about the political feasibility argument. It certainly is radical within the American context. But like social democracy, one of the promises of it is supposed to be like equal opportunity. If you don't have access to equal healthcare, equal education, then to some degree that promise is not fulfilled.
I don't disagree. Why? I don't disagree with you.
Well, sure. Then like when they say that it's human rights, when they want these to be like free for everyone, to me, this seems like a noble goal. I don't exactly understand what your problem with it is. Because if it's just messaging, then...
Unfortunately, the messaging has become like pretty fucking important. When I bring somebody on and we've got to spend 20 minutes arguing like, well, what does it mean when we say this is free? Or what does it mean when you say defund or abolish the police? It's like, it's cancerous for voters.
So I'll agree that defund the police is terrible messaging because it's extremely unpopular. I will not agree that saying like, hey, education is a human right is extremely unpopular or very difficult to explain.
What does what does that mean?
Sure, it would generally mean that if something's a human right, you want to ensure that every person has access to it. There's various ways of going around it, right? When I talked about the quadrants, they're like those are the 4 types of ways that government programs can go about it. It's either cash or in kind, it's universal, or it's means tested. But all of these are ways that we achieve, we ensure universality of something.
Sure, and I don't disagree with you.
Sometimes we just give people cash.
Sure, 1,000,000%, and I don't disagree with you. And for some things, market is dog shit. Of course, I don't disagree with you. But this idea that everything you needs to be universally available and free at the point of service, or even things like education, I'm not even sure if that exists.
That's That's the point. I don't know that when they say that something is a human right, therefore it should be free, they're saying free at the point of service. Because I think the
What?
word free or human rights are some like not human rights is
Do you
better
understand
defined,
how
but free is
confusing it
somewhat
is?
undefined.
Do you understand how confusing it is when somebody says we need to cancel all the debt related to these two things because they're human rights? Do you understand how maybe that might imply to some people that you're saying that those things should be free at the point of service? Or do you think that's a wild misinterpretation by me? That
So I guess I could see it as that possibly, but I think that like it's very easy to imagine a system where college would be subsidized to the point that virtually no one would be having debts where it would be an issue, right? Like I think Biden's, for example, more radical proposal was not Biden, or like the thing that people were pushing in the media was cancel all debt below $50,000. If school were subsidized, very few people would come out with that kind of debt, with that anything approaching that magnitude. So when people talk about this as a problem, it wouldn't be a problem if school were subsidized. That's the way I think about this.
sure, I don't disagree with any of that. If somebody would have come out and say we need to provide more accessibility or access for people that can't afford to go to school, or no one in the United States shouldn't be attending a higher education institution because they don't have the money for it, or things like college, university, or community college or whatever, it needs to be accessible to every single student in the United States. These are all things that I agree with. But when you say cancel all student debt, it's a human right, it feels like you're implying way more in that statement than just like accessibility for everybody. It seems like but maybe that's just not fair for me. I don't know. I feel like I read so much of this universality. Maybe I'm getting brain fucked by that Medlock guy who's like keeps spamming universality for the solution to every single fucking problem in American society. But I don't know. Like it feels like these more. I've yet to see that, but okay. It feels like this idea.
Actually, if you want a neat study to read about this, one study that I read in like first year in undergrad was called, I think it's pretty famous. It's called More Normal Than Welfare. One of the simplest benefits of universal benefits is that it's harder to hate on the recipients of welfare. And another extremely famous study is that one of the reasons America has a smaller welfare state than other places is because white people don't like to give money to black people who are disproportionately poor, and so they try to tear down the welfare state. There are like these benefits to universality just in like the human or political advocacy route.
I
Even
don't disagree that there are benefits to universality, but you've also got the massive drawback that you need like 50 times the funding in order to make it work. When you make something universal for every single person, you're not bringing in any private money into that institution anymore, then that thing becomes like 50x times more expensive in order to fund. And it becomes a much fucking harder political battle, meaning that the only things that you can pass universal are things that are universally popular anyway. Like
So I don't have stats on hand to demonstrate the administrative costs of some of these programs, but I have been told, I have seen some studies on specific programs, like specific welfare I remember it was a really famous thing with drug testing, that like drug testing is notoriously expensive and the amount of people that it gets off of welfare is extremely small.
I know that. I've looked at those
arguments-
studies, but that's not means testing. That's drug testing.
Well, it's a form of means testing,
No,
right?
oh
Means
my God.
This isn't trying to pin you or something. Like means literally is like trying to find the needy poor, and so some people don't consider those who use drugs to be the needy poor. It's like the way that conservatives think about
I
the world.
understand that.
Right.
Generally, when we talk about means testing, we're usually talking about money, not whether or not you
Sure.
do drugs.
No, I agree.
The reason why specifically I would limit that to money is because money is way easier to means test than administering a drug test. For money, it can be as easy as give me your social security number, authorize me to look at your taxes, or provide a copy of your tax returns, and bam, your means are tested. As opposed to drug testing, which requires a whole infrastructure to fucking do. I'm familiar with those drug testing things. When conservatives tried to cut off welfare to poor people and they did drug testing, it was a horrendous fucking waste of money because drug testing is expensive and it's a stupid idea anyway. That's way different than income means tested.
So again, I don't have the stats on hand, but as I understand it, part of the big welfare reform in the United States in like the 90s was this shift towards workfare. And so a whole bunch of welfare programs are now tied to you like seeking work and proving that you meet these work requirements. How do we check that people met these work requirements? Well, you've got to file it with a social worker. Well, you've got to file it with the agency. There's this like these added levels of paperwork. I don't know that it's true that the amount of paperwork that you would save from a shift to universality is sufficient to pay for the cost of the program, but it could be that like the additional costs we're talking about for many of these programs, which are relatively small in terms of budgetary impact, aren't so large that the political advantage that we would gain from spending $1 billion extra on food stamps or something by just giving it to your rich uncle in like, I don't know, like the gated community or whatever, that this outweighs the benefit.
The problem is I don't think people I'm pretty sure it is literally like a 50 or 100x increase in funding. If I've got 100% of a population that I've got to pay for as opposed to like 20% with like 50% chipping in the entire cost, like the difference in money that you're going to need for this is massive. It's not like the difference between like 100 million and 200 million if it's universal. It'd be like 100 million and like $10 billion. It would be a massive difference in the types of funds that you would need to raise for this.
Possibly. So again, I just don't have the stats on hand. I can't answer this question empirically. So
Sure.
I can't prove this.
I mean, like if
I saw your tweet like 5 minutes ago. So.
Sure, I understand. It would be a bit more complicated to do it. And the only reason I'm making these arguments is because I know that the UK education system wrestled with this. But like, if you have 100 people, well, like, if you imagine your head, if you have like 100 people that need something, if like 40% can pay for it, 40% can pay a little bit, and 20% can't pay at all. If you try to raise $10,000 for every single person, you have to raise so much more money than if you have to raise just enough money to cover that bottom like 20 people and a little bit of the 40 in the middle, and then the top 40 are still paying money into that system. Like, it's so much more.
So one of the relevant questions here, and this isn't directly about the program, but it's about funding for the program, is the argument is that you can, if you simply raise taxes on the rich to account for that increased cost, and then you then directly give, especially if it's a cash benefit, that cash back to the rich, it's hard to argue that this is like, basically the argument is, let's say that you raise taxes such that it accounts for this, but the actual distribution of money also goes to the rich such that it's not like a huge distortion. So there aren't like some big econ meme arguments that it's going to like distort the economy. I'm not sure that this necessarily holds as true as it does. Like the net impact is smaller than I think it is, depending on the funding.
I understand what you're talking about, and I agree with you if we were calculators, but that's not what people are going to see. People are going to see the difference between like a top marginal rate of like 60% versus like 45% or something, or 60% versus like 50%. Where you're going to have to raise taxes way more if you want to extract enough money to give it back to some people in the form of education.
The problem with this is that the messaging for these things is always so like when you talk to people about healthcare, for example, like single payer is a big meme for this, and it would be true for public option as well. They're just going to say, oh, you're going to spend $16 trillion over 10 years, over like 300 million people. To pay for healthcare for everyone. And you've got to say, well, actually, you're currently spending that out of your private pocketbook. You've got to go through all these hoops anyway. I think this is just like a problem with most social spending, that like people have difficulty understanding that they are spending for it right now. It's just not in a socialized way that they're spending. It's an individualized spend.
Okay, well, when the messaging changes, I guess, and people substantially change the way that they look at how taxes work and everything, maybe I would be a little bit warmer to this idea, but that's not the reality they live in right now. I don't mind or go ahead. What were you gonna say? Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I don't mind the theoretical approach to like what would an optimal distribution or an optimal administration and distribution of taxes look like in a given society. It's just very fucking annoying when real policy discussions get hijacked by people that come in like, universal everything. Look at this paper. And it's like, okay, dude, but like that politically, this is unviable. Like, I don't care. Even if this is economically better. And there are things that are economically better, like and financially better for everybody, like economic in terms of fiscal impact and economically better in terms of like everybody like saves money or whatever. But like if it's not politically viable, who the fuck cares? Other than rich white people that don't give a fuck about these programs at the end of the day, and anyway, other than through Twitter arguments, right? Like at the end of the day, the ultimate goal.
Sorry,
I was gonna say at the end of the day, the ultimate goal is policy. That's what we want. We want to get policy that through Congress to like make changes in people's lives, not win Twitter arguments over who's got the better paper for some highly theoretical distribution that can't be implemented. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to mention, so I read Politics is for Power, and you did too. And one of the things they did mention is that us high income, like white people who are far from like the everyday like struggle of trying to get through life, we have less, we do less political participation, we do more hobbyism, we just debate online, and we're like ideological purists. So I do agree that there is some truth to the idea that online people will tend to, particularly the type of people that will be online, that will spend all their time online, spend all their time debating online, will tend to be more extreme than what is politically viable. However, I think there is another important metric here, which is that like leadership can change people's positions. I mentioned this a little bit in, I think when we were talking with Bastiat, like if National Democrats start talking more about left-wing policy, they will bring people along to left-wing policy, the same way that Republicans can change people's views on like free to trade or a variety of policies. So there is some utility in having the conversation shift to the left, even if I would say there might be some like detritus, some like shitty policy ideas that also get popular as a result of that.
I don't necessarily disagree with that move to the left is good. But you have to play a very, very, very careful balancing act while you're doing that. Because now we have a 6-3 majority conservative court, and we're fucked on the Supreme Court for decades. Like, and I'm not blaming necessarily the left for that, but I'm just saying that, like, you have to be careful not to lose elections because you're trying to push, your messaging too far to the left. I don't disagree with, like, trying to bring people along with you, or testing these things even in certain states first, or having your more kind of safer Democrats, like your justice Dems, come out in favor of certain policies that are, like, more far left to kind of bring the party along. But you can't just go to, like, your most vulnerable districts and be like, fuck you for not supporting Medicare for all, fuck you for not supporting the Green New Deal, fuck, like, holy shit, like, you have to be politically feasible with your ideas.
Sure. So I do agree that there is a messaging thing. I will say on the 2020 election, it's very hard to know what actually happened. Like,
sure, I agree with that. We don't know 100% yet, of course.
Yes, I was just going to mention, like, Nate Cohn and Nate Silver both have articles out saying, like, we don't actually entirely know what went wrong with the polls. One of the interesting stats that they mentioned from a guy named David Shore is that Biden consistently did much better in the polling in areas with a lot of COVID, but in the actual election, he didn't do any better in areas that had higher rates of COVID. So one of the very real possibilities for why Biden underperformed the polls is that people were scared of COVID, didn't vote, and didn't, like, go out to participate, didn't do all of the usual stuff that would be involved in activism around an election. So it's very hard to know whether, like, in other words, the argument the left constantly gives is the base will get riled up and they'll come out and vote and come out and be volunteers. And the argument the centrist gives is like, no, we need to be moderates and change people's minds.
Sure, and
really
I don't know where we'll end on that.
True.
Yeah, sure, and I don't know where we'll end on that. David Shore was posting the other day where he was saying that the story of this election was actually that a lot of people that had previously voted for Trump had switched over and had voted for Democrats as well. So the moderate poll was actually
one of the
really
problems with his. So one of the problems is these two hypotheses. It's very hard to test which one is true because the same groups that were hit the most by COVID were the poor, they were the blacks. The people that switched to Biden were the white middle class suburb people who weren't hit by COVID nearly so hard. So it's really hard actually to prove which one of these is true. That's all I'm gonna like.
Sure. I don't disagree. Social science fucking sucks, and it's really, really hard to figure out. We'll probably never know the full story of what's going on because it's so hard to account for everything. Sure, I don't disagree.
Well, we will know probably in 2022. So wait 2 years, then you can have this debate and don't debunk me. Okay.
Okay. I love you, buddy.
One last thing I want to say. Will you admit that you're on Twitter you're like substantially more combative than you are? This conversation was pretty combative.
Sorry, wait. Okay, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, on Twitter, will you admit that you are more combative on Twitter than you are in most streams? Like in most streams, you try to be pretty like agreeable to people.
But yeah, I am. I've only got 140 characters, but people say egregiously fucking stupid shit on Twitter, unimaginably fucking stupid shit constantly, and it's so fucking tiring to read. I don't know how I still get all this shit that shows up in mentions when I thought I unfollowed like every left-leaning dumb fuck online. Not you though. I love you. Okay. Holy fuck, it's so annoying to read the shit.
Well,
but then dunking on conservatives is annoying too because it's just the same like fucking Tim Pool and Steven Crowder are like these delusional fuckheads. Everything about online politics is so fucking stupid.
True.
I don't know. Okay.
Well, I guess thanks for having me on.
Okay. Plug your channel. Who are you?
Where make everything universal. Okay. Get Medlocked pilled.
Oh God. Wait.
Yeah.
Never mind. Oh wait. Oh yeah. Who are you? Plug your stuff.
Sure. I'm Socialism Done Left. I did the Bastiat debate. You can find me on YouTube or Twitch. Or Twitter, because Destiny quote tweeted me.
Okay. Here you go. Here's his Twitter.
Or, sorry, Destiny's friend. My bad.
This guy's a pretty cool dude. Here you go. All right. I love you. Be careful, okay?
You too.
Okay. Fucker. Bye. What was okay. I almost figured this out last night.